Ever feel like there's more to a familiar story than meets the eye? Like maybe you've only scratched the surface.
Definitely.
Well, that's what we're doing today.
Eh.
Diving deep into the Book of Ruth.
It's amazing how much depth there is to uncover, even in a story we think we know.
Right. We're going to explore the structure, those powerful characters, and that subtle message about God's presence, even in the everyday stuff.
And to really appreciate it, I think we have to remember the setting. It starts with, in the days when the judges ruled, which, let's be honest, was pretty chaotic.
Yeah, not exactly known for stability and strong moral leadership.
Exactly. So against that backdrop, the story of resilience and hope, it becomes even more powerful.
I love that. So let's break it down. We begin with a family fleeing famine in Bethlehem.
Desperate times.
Right, they go to Moab to find food. But remember, Moab, that's enemy territory.
Huge cultural and religious significance there. It was considered ritually unclean and, theologically opposed to Israel.
Okay, so then tragedy strikes. Naomi, the mother, is left widowed, and with her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah.
And it's here that Ruth's character really shines.
For sure. Amabite is choosing to stay with her mother-in-law. That's huge.
Absolutely. It flies in the face of what would have been expected. Shows her incredible loyalty.
And then she makes that powerful statement in Ruth 1:16. Wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God.
Chills.
Right. Talk about a turning point. It's a declaration of commitment, not just to Naomi, but to a whole new way of life.
And it hints at her own incredible spiritual journey.
Absolutely. But let's not forget Naomi in all of this.
Of course. She's dealing with immense grief, loss of her husband, her sons, her security, her home.
She even changes her name to Mara, meaning bitter.
Such a powerful image. Affects her despair, but maybe also foreshadows a shift in fortune.
Ooh, I like that foreshadowing.
Ooh.
And then enters Boaz, seemingly by chance during the barley harvest.
Talk about divine timing.
Seriously, Ruth needs to provide for herself and Naomi, so she ends up gleaning in Boaz's field.
Which just happens to be a relative of Naomi's.
And not just any relative. He's described as a man of noble character.
That's a key phrase. It links directly back to the Torah's commands to care for the vulnerable, especially immigrants and the poor.
So Boaz showing generosity to Ruth is actually him living out his faith.
Exactly. It reveals his righteous nature.
And then there's this little detail in Ruth 2:12. We see Boaz praying for Ruth.
He notices her, he sees her loyalty to Naomi, and he asks God to bless her.
It's a small moment, but it speaks volumes.
It does. It also introduces this crucial concept of the family redeemer.
Okay, break that down for us.
So in ancient Israel, the family redeemer had a specific role protecting the family line and property of a deceased relative.
So in a way, they were stepping in to ensure the family's future.
Exactly. And in the hands of someone like Boaz, it offers a glimmer of hope for Naomi and Ruth.
Okay, so Naomi, she's a smart woman. She sees the potential in Boaz.
She does, and she encourages Ruth to subtly, signal her availability for marriage.
I love that she's taking charge.
Right, and the cultural nuances here are fascinating.
Like what?
Well, Ruth's actions, like uncovering Boaz's feet at night, might seem strange to us. But in that time and place, they had a very specific meaning.
He was all about sending the right signals.
Exactly, signals of her intentions and her trust in Boaz's honor.
And then we get that scene where Ruth approaches Boaz at night.
Talk about a bold move.
He wakes up startled, and Ruth, with incredible courage, asks him to be the family redeemer and marry her.
It's a huge risk, putting her fate entirely in his hands.
And how does Boaz react?
Not at all how you might expect in that kind of situation. He doesn't dismiss her or try to take advantage.
Yeah.
Instead, he praises Ruth's noble character.
Wait, that's the same language used to describe the ideal woman in Proverbs 31?
You got it. He sees her strength, her virtue, her unwavering loyalty.
It's like he truly recognizes her worth.
He does. But just when we think it's all working out, there's a twist.
Oh no. What happens?
There's another relative closer to Naomi who actually has the first right to be the redeemer.
Oh, so it's not as simple as Boaz just saying yes?
Not at all. And this is where the contrast between the two potential redeemers becomes really clear.
How so?
Well, this other relative, unlike Boaz, he doesn't really know Ruth. He's more concerned with the social implications of marrying a Moabitess than with honoring the family line.
It's like he's looking at the situation from a purely practical standpoint.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what will happen next. Will he step up? Or will Boaz get the chance to fulfill the role? It's a real nail-biter.
Totally.
Yeah.
So does he. Does he step up and redeem the family?
Well, this is where Boaz's integrity really shines.
Okay.
He brings the whole thing before the city elders lays it all out. full transparency.
So everyone knows what's going on.
Exactly. And the other relative, when he realizes what's involved, he backs out.
Wow, I bet that wasn't an easy decision.
Not in that culture.
Right.
Declining this responsibility, it would have been a major blow to his reputation, seen as failing his family duty.
You're telling me. But Boaz, he steps right up.
He does. He's seen Ruth's character firsthand, and he's not afraid to honor it and, honor Naomi too.
What a contrast between those two guys.
Right. Huge. One driven by social pressure, the other by compassion and a deep respect for who Ruth really is.
It's got a testament to looking beyond appearances and seeing the true value in someone.
Exactly. And it reminds me of how God often works, through the unexpected.
What do you mean?
Well, here you have Ruth, a Moabite widow. By all social standards, she should have been completely marginalized.
Right.
But she ends up playing a pivotal role in God's plan.
It's like God sees what we don't.
Yeah.
He looks beyond the labels and the categories.
He does. He values faithfulness, loyalty, humility, and he often uses those who are overlooked by society to accomplish his purposes.
And that's exactly what happens next, right?
And it is. The story takes a complete 180 from the tragedy of the beginning.
How so?
Ruth gives birth to a son, bringing joy to Naomi, of course, but also restoring her family line, ensuring its continuation.
Wow, talk about new beginnings.
Right. It's this powerful image of hope emerging from what seemed like hopeless circumstances.
And it reinforces that theme of redemption that runs throughout the story.
Absolutely. It speaks to God's faithfulness, his ability to bring beauty and purpose, even out of the most difficult situations.
And, the way the book is structured, it really emphasizes that.
You're right. That symmetry between the opening scenes of loss and sorrow and the closing chapters filled with celebration and promise, it's intentional.
One thing that's always struck me about Ruth, God's rarely mentioned directly.
That's true.
But his presence is so evident throughout the narrative.
It's the genius of the storytelling.
Yeah.
You don't need to explicitly state God's involvement because it's woven into every twist and turn.
It's like you can see his hand at work behind the scenes.
Exactly. Orchestrating events, guiding choices, bringing about his redemptive plan.
It's like he's the master weaver, creating this intricate tapestry.
I like that. And each thread, each event, no matter how small, contributes to the overall masterpiece.
The famine, the migration, the deaths, that chance meeting of Ruth and Boaz, it's all part of a bigger divine design.
And that brings us to the grand finale of the book, the genealogy. The final verses connect Boaz and Ruth's son, Obed, to King David.
Wait, King David, the shepherd who defeated Goliath, the one who became one of the most famous kings of Israel.
That's the one.
You're kidding. So this seemingly simple story about a Moabite widow and an Israelite farmer, it's linked to royalty.
It is. And not just any royalty, ultimately to the lineage of the Messiah.
That's mind-blowing. Their everyday struggles, their faithfulness, it all becomes part of this much grander narrative.
It does God's narrative of salvation, and it suddenly gives their lives even more significance.
Makes you wonder what genealogies we might be unknowingly contributing to right now through our own actions.
That's a powerful thought. The Book of Ruth seems to whisper, pay attention, look closer. God is at work in the details.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think, what are we doing today that might have ripple effects we can't even imagine?
Right. It's humbling and exciting at the same time.
For sure. We're all part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. The Book of Ruth reminds us to look for those little hints of God's presence in our own lives.
To be more aware of how he might be moving, even when we don't realize it.
And to be open to the unexpected. Ruth, a Moabite widow, could never have predicted that her story would become part of the lineage of King David and eventually the Messiah.
Talk about exceeding expectations.
Right. And it challenges our ideas of success and importance. It's her faithfulness, her loyalty, her courage, those everyday acts of kindness that had such a huge impact.
And that impact, it wasn't just limited to her lifetime.
Not at all. It echoes through generations.
Which brings us to another key theme, redemption.
Ah, yes. Naomi's family starts out broken, seemingly hopeless.
But then through Ruth's actions and Boaz's willingness to step up, it's completely transformed.
Such a beautiful picture of God's power to take our brokenness, our difficult situations, and weave them into a story of redemption.
And not just personal redemption, but something that affects the whole world.
You got it. Remember that lineage. It leads to Jesus, the ultimate redeemer of all humanity.
Wow, it's like this chain reaction starting with one act of faithfulness, and then expanding outward to encompass the entire world.
And that's the beauty of God's plan. He uses ordinary people living ordinary lives to accomplish extraordinary things.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Ruth, I keep coming back to this question. If God used Ruth, a seemingly insignificant Moabite widow, to play such a pivotal role in his redemptive plan, what might he be calling us to do?
It's the question, isn't it? What opportunities are we missing? How can we be part of his work in the world?
And maybe the answer is right in front of us?
Maybe. It could be those everyday moments of grace, those small choices to love and serve others, even when we think no one's watching.
The things that don't seem to matter much in the grand scheme of things.
But the Book of Ruth challenges us to think differently. What if those small acts of faithfulness actually have a ripple effect that extends far beyond what we can see? What if they contribute to a genealogy that we're not even aware of?
It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, God is still at work weaving his story of redemption. And he invites us to join him, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to leave a legacy of faithfulness for generations to come.
That's a beautiful thought and a perfect note to end on.
I agree. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Book of Ruth.
It's been a pleasure.